Hi, I'm Tracy Wunderlich. Welcome to Lesson 3. Congratulations, you're now an intermediate knitter. Today's project is going to be a beautiful scarf that has a cable knit pattern and a color block design. In order to get started, we're going to begin a sample piece. The sample piece will teach you how to do a cable stitch. So get your supplies together, and what you'll need is any color of worsted weight yarn, preferably a light color because your cable pattern will show up a little bit better, a pair of size 5 needles, and also your cable knit stitch holder. Your cable knit stitch holder looks like a U-shaped piece that has varying sizes of tips, a shorter and a longer tip. So get your supplies ready and we'll be ready to begin. The sample piece, when it's finished, will look like this. As you can see, it has several twists. These are called cables. So we're going to begin by learning how to do a basic cable knit stitch. You can also see that the cable stitches are set off by purl stitches. There are purls on either side. If you unfold the sides, you can see that there are purl stitches here. The cables are done in a knit stitch. Purl stitches in the center, more of the knit stitch for the second set of cables, and purl stitch on the sides. This creates the illusion that the cable itself is actually raised up. You'll need to start by having about 2 to 3 feet of yarn. Secure it with a slip knot. Slide your slip knot onto your needle and cast on a total of 20 stitches. We'll refresh our casting on again. You're going to begin by putting your first finger and your thumb between the yarn. Grasp the remaining yarn ends with your 3 fingers. Then point the needle first at your thumb, bring it around the yarn and secure. Point at your finger, bring around the yarn and secure. Put it back through the loop and remove it from your thumb and pull to secure. That's how we do our cast on stitch. Let's do a few more. Again, point at your thumb, secure your finger, secure your thumb, through, remove your thumb, and pull it tight. Once more, thumb, secure, finger, secure, through, remove your thumb, and pull tight. I now have a total of 4 stitches on my needle. Continue in this fashion until you have a total of 20 stitches on your needle. Once you have a total of 20 stitches on the needle, you'll begin knitting across. We're going to do a pattern that is actually kind of like a ribbing pattern. We're going to do groups of 4. We're going to knit 4, purl 4, knit 4, purl 4, and knit 4 more across. So go ahead and work with me and begin by knitting the first 4 stitches. That's 1. Remember, when you're knitting, you're coming in from the front. Bring the thread around from behind, around the back needle, between, pull the tip of your needle through and slide off. Do the first 4 stitches as a knit. Then we're going to change to purl stitches. Remember to bring your yarn from behind to the front to begin the purl stitches. And again, on purl stitches, you enter from behind and wrap your thread around, through and off the needle. Do 4 purl stitches. Take your needle back to the back and do 4 more knit stitches. Bring your yarn to the front and do 4 more purl stitches. And to the back for the final 4 knit stitches. Go ahead and turn your piece around and you'll be ready to do the second row. This time you're going to start with purl stitches instead of knit stitches to keep the continuity as your pattern goes up. So on this row it'll be 4 purls, 4 knits, 4 purls, 4 knits, and 4 more purls. Go ahead and complete this row. Once you've finished your second row, you should see a pattern beginning to emerge. You'll have knits, purls, and knits. You want to continue in this fashion until you have a total of 6 rows on your needle. We've already completed the first 2, so just 4 more rows, and then we'll begin to do the cables. At this point, your piece should look like this. It should begin with purl stitches, then knit stitches, purls, knits, and purls. You can see that the cabling is beginning to emerge. These 2 sections of knits are where the cables are going to be. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Make sure that you have your knit stitch holder. That's this tool right here. When I tell you to load on the stitches, you're going to load them onto the short end and you're going to knit them off of the long end. So let's go ahead and begin. First, you'll purl the first 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you'll use your knit stitch holder, load the first 2 stitches onto the short end, and you can either do it 1 stitch at a time, like this, or you can load both stitches on and then take them off of the needle. Slide them down to the U-shaped part and put it behind the work. Now go ahead and knit the next 2 stitches. Make sure that you pull the yarn very tight on these 2 stitches. That way you'll make sure that there isn't a hole. If you don't pull those 2 stitches tight, sometimes there will be a hole right in there, and we want to avoid that. After you've knit the next 2 stitches, come back to your stitch holder, slide the stitches down to the long end, and then knit off of the long end just like it's another needle. So go ahead and knit these 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Discard your cable stitch holder. Bring your yarn from the back to the front because we're ready to purl again. Purl the next 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bring your yarn to the back so you're ready to knit again. Introduce your cable stitch holder. Load the next 2 stitches onto the short end. Bring them down to the U end of the loop. Pull it to the back of the work. Knit the next 2 stitches. Remember to pull your yarn tight after each of these stitches to ensure that there's not a hole. Grasp your cable knit holder again from behind and knit off of the end just like this is another needle. So there's 1 and 2. Slide it off. Discard your cable stitch holder. Bring your yarn from the back to the front. Purl the last 4 stitches. And now when you look at your work at this point, before you turn it around, you should be able to see your cables beginning to emerge. You'll have 2 twists in the middle here, and as we continue, they'll open back up and look like beautiful cables. Go ahead and turn your piece over. Begin this row by knitting. As you can see, you're in a knit segment. So go ahead and knit 4. Bring your yarn forward, purl 4. Treat these stitches just like regular stitches. They'll be a little bit tighter because you've done a twist there. That's where your cable is. Take your yarn to the back of your work again and knit 4. Bring your yarn to the front of your work and purl 4. Again, these stitches will be tight because this is where you've just done another cable. Take your yarn to the back of your work and knit these last 4 stitches. Turn your piece over, and you can see your beautiful cables are starting to emerge. Go ahead and continue in this fashion until you have a total of 6 rows. So we've just done 1 row. We need to do 5 more rows, and then we'll be ready to insert another row of cabling. At this point, your piece should look like this. This is the back side. You'll have a nice cable in the middle. This is the side we're getting ready to work on, and you'll be able to see a little pinched place where each of your cables were. We're ready to go ahead and start the next row that'll have cables. We're working from the back side this time in order to show you that working from either the front side or the back side, you'll still be able to accomplish a cable knit stitch. Okay, so let's begin. First, you'll knit 4 stitches. Knit 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bring in your cable knit stitch holder, load onto the short end, take the first 2 stitches, bring them down to the U portion, take it to the back of your work. Remember to bring your thread to the front of your work because you're going to be purling now. Purl the next 2 stitches, pull them tight so there's no hole. 1 and 2. Come back to your cable stitch holder and purl the last 2 stitches from here. 1 and 2. Set aside your cable stitch holder. Take your yarn to the back of your work. Knit 4 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bring back your cable stitch holder. Load the 2 stitches onto the short end. 1 and 2. Bring them down to the U end. Put it to the back of your work. Don't forget to take your yarn from the back to the front. Purl 2. Make sure you pull these nice and tight so there's no hole. 1 and 2. Come back to the cable knit stitch holder and purl these 2 stitches from here. 1 and 2. Discard your cable stitch holder. Now go ahead and take your yarn to the back of the work and knit the last 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Turn your piece over, spread it out, and you'll be able to see that you have now completed your second cable. It still goes the same direction, and it didn't make any difference whether we did it from the knit side or the purl side. So now you're going to do 6 more rows, continuing in the pattern. So because we're beginning with this side, you'll do purls first, then knits, purls, knits, and purls. Continue in that fashion for 6 rows, and we'll be ready to go ahead and pick up another row of cables. At this point, your piece should look like this. You should have 2 sets of cabling done, and it should have 3 sections separating the cables. As you can see, it looks like it stands up off of the project because we've surrounded it with purl stitches on all sides. We're ready to go ahead and start on the next row of cabling stitch. So work with me now and purl the first 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Use your cable stitch holder. Take the first 2 stitches off. Pull them to the back. Make sure that you take your yarn to the back of the work. Go ahead and knit these next 2 stitches. Make sure you pull them tight so there's no hole. Now we're ready to go ahead and knit them off of the cable stitch holder. One thing I want to point out, if you'll turn your work over, you can see right here, this is the cable stitch holder, and when we first put the stitches on, we put them on the small end. As we're working the stitches off, we're working on the long end. As you can see, they're not twisted at all. You don't want to have this turned around so they're twisted like this. You want to make sure that they lay nice and flat, just like you loaded them onto the knit stitch holder. So let's go ahead and take those stitches off. Knit them from the long end, make sure there's no twist. 1 and 2. Set your holder aside. Purl the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bring back your cable knit stitch holder. Load on the first 2 stitches. Bring it to the back of your work. Remember to put the thread to the back of your work because you're knitting again. Knit 1, pull real tight again, and 2. Retrieve those 2 stitches off of the long side of your cable knit stitch holder. Knit 1 and 2. Set your holder aside, bring your thread to the front, and finish the row by doing a row of purl stitches. One thing I want to point out at this point, if you look at the cables, we've now finished 3 cables on our sample piece. If you look closely, you'll be able to see that there are 2 rows that come up and cross each other. They continue up, they cross each other again, continue and cross back and forth that way. Each of these is 3 stitches wide, so there's 3 stitches on one side, 3 stitches on the other. As they progress up, you've got a nice even balance back and forth because you've got 2 sections that are the same width. Whenever you're working with cable stitches, you want to make sure that you're cabling an even number. That'll make certain that your cables are even on both sides and you've got a nice consistent twist going up your piece. One exception to that rule is if you're trying to create the effect of a snake around a tree. What I mean is if you were to use 4 stitches across like we're using here, and you were to do 3 stitches and then 1 to do your cable, so you'd pull the first 3 off, set them aside, knit 1, bring back and knit your 3 off of the cable knit stitch holder. If you continued in that pattern all the way up, you would get the effect of a skinny snake working around a large tree trunk. So that's the only exception to that rule. Otherwise, you want to have nice even cables and you want to work with an even number of stitches. Divide it in half and take that many to the front or the back, depending on how you want your cable to appear. So at this point, let's go ahead and finish up our sample. You'll need to do a total of 6 more rows, and then we'll be ready to cast off. At this point, your piece should look just like this. You should have 1, 2, 3 sets of cables going up. You should have some beautiful twisting work separated by the purl stitches, which makes it stand out nicely. We're ready to cast off, and then we'll begin our scarf project. So in order to cast off, go ahead and purl the first stitch, purl the second stitch, take the first stitch over the second stitch and off of the needle. Purl the next stitch, take the first stitch up and over the needle, purl one more time, go up and over. Now at this point, when you're casting off anything that is done in any kind of a ribbing pattern, you need to alternate back and forth between the purl stitches and the knit stitches. So this time we're going to take the thread to the back and we're going to continue casting off knitwise. So knit the next stitch, cast off, knit, cast off, knit, cast off, knit, Cast off. Bring your thread from the back to the front. Purl. Cast off. Continue this way across the entire row until all of the stitches are cast off. As you read patterns, you'll find that they will tell you to cast off purl-wise or cast off knit-wise. This is what they mean. You're doing a combination of casting off knit-wise and casting off purl-wise as you finish this sample piece. When you get to the last stitch, you'll want to cut your yarn, pull the loop out, bring the end through, and pull your string tight. Now you've finished your sample piece. It should look like this. And we're ready to move on to our next project. This time we're going to be working on a scarf. It'll have a combination of color blocks as well as cable stitches. So this time you need to get your size 5 needles. Those are the ones we worked on already. You'll also need 2 colors of yarn. Contrasting colors are great. That way you can tell definitely where your stripes stop and start, and you'll still need your cable knit stitch holder. So gather your supplies and we'll get ready to begin the scarf. We're ready now to begin the cable knit color block scarf. So take your first color, bring in a slip knot, slide it onto your needle, and this time we'll be casting on a total of 34 stitches. So remember to count this stitch here that you've done with your slip knot and cast on a total of 34 stitches. Turn your piece around and we'll be ready to begin with the pattern. This time, instead of having even blocks like we had on the sample of groups of 4, we are going to have instead groups of 4 and groups of 6. So you'll want to begin with a group of 4 knit stitches. So knit 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bring your yarn from behind to the front. We'll purl 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bring it to the back. Knit 4 more. We're going to continue in this pattern of 4 knits and 6 purls until you get to the end of the row. Go ahead and continue in this fashion until you have a total of 8 rows on, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and change colors. At this point, your piece should look like this. You should have squares going across of alternating groups, knitting, purling, knitting, purling, knitting, purling, and knitting, and now we're ready to change colors. So go ahead and take your thread, your new color, clip the end of your old color, leave yourself about 12 to 18 inches, bring your new color up close, hold it, just hold it right on, don't tie it or anything, and begin to knit. So you'll continue the pattern, so as you hold it tight against, you'll knit the first 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4. At this point you can probably go ahead and let it loose. You'll notice that both strings are a little bit loose, and we're going to worry about those when we get to the end of the row. Bring your yarn forward, purl the next 6, continue your pattern all the way to the end of the row, and then we'll be ready to tie off where you joined the new color. All right, as you get to the end, you'll want to turn your piece over, And then take both of the ends, the end of the last color and the end of the new color, and you'll tie them in a square knot, right over left, pull it nice and tight, left over right, pull it tight again, and we'll weave both of these ends in at the end, so you can leave these ends to hang. That's how you will go ahead and change a color when it's at the end or the beginning of a row. You'll need to continue with the new color for a total of 6 rows. At that point, we'll be ready to change colors again and begin with our cabling design. Now your piece should look about like this. You've successfully completed 2 portions of the color block, and now we're ready to move on to one more color block section, and in this next color block section we will begin the cabling design. So go ahead and add your next color, hold it close, begin by knitting, knit across the first 4, then continue across the entire row in the pattern design. You're going to continue with this color again until you have a total of 5 rows, and then we will be ready to introduce the cabling again. Don't forget when you get to the end of this row to go back and tie off your 2 threads. Your project is really starting to come together now. You can see the color block pattern starting to emerge, and you can also see where we're ready to insert our cables now. So let's begin by working across this row. We'll purl the first section, purl 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you notice, this time we have sections that are purl 4 and knit 6. So your cables this time are going to be 3 and 3. So this time, unlike our sample, you're going to take 3 stitches onto your cable knit stitch holder. So 1, 2, 3. Put it at the back of your work. Make sure that you take your thread around to the back because we're knitting now. Knit the next 3 stitches. 1, make sure we pull them nice and tight so there's no hole. 2, 3, slide those saved stitches back around to the long side, knit them off. 1, 2, and 3. Set aside your cable stitch holder. Purl the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bring your thread to the back because we'll knit again. Slide the next 3 stitches onto the holder. 1, 2, 3, put it to the back of your work, knit the last 3 stitches, 1, pull tight, 2, and 3, slide the saved stitches to the long side of your holder, knit them off, 1, 2, and 3. Set your stitch holder aside, bring your yarn forward, purl 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, bring your yarn to the back because we're knitting again, slide 3 more stitches onto the short end of your cable stitch holder, slide it to the back of your work, knit 1, pull tight, 2 and 3. Retrieve those 3 stitches from the cable knit stitch holder. 1, 2, and 3, and purl the last 4 stitches on the row. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Continue in this pattern 5 more rows, and then we'll be ready to change for the color block again. Your scarf is really starting to take some shape now. You've got the color block pattern showing now, and you also have your first set of cables in place. We want to make this a double-sided scarf so that there's not necessarily a front or a back when you wear it. And so in order to accomplish that, we're going to do our second set of cables on the opposite side of the scarf. So the cables for one color will be on one side of the scarf, and the cables for the other side will be on the other side of the scarf. That way it'll be double-sided and will look beautiful no matter which part of it is showing when you wear the scarf. So now we're going to change color. Change to your second color now. Remember, we're just holding the yarn tight on the side. This time we're going to change color on a purl stitch. You're going to do it just the same. Just work all the way across this row, and then you can tie it off when you get to the end. So start by purling 4. Knit 6, purl 4, knit 6, continue all the way across the row until you finish changing over your color, and then be sure to tie off. Continue in the same pattern until you've completed 5 rows. After you've knitted the next 5 rows, your piece should look like this. This is the back side at this point because your cables are on this side. The cables in the one color are here. But like we mentioned before, we want to make sure that this is a double-sided piece. So this time we're going to make the cables on the second color on this side. So work with me now. We're not going to do them on these 3 sections. We're going to do them on the sections between. So if you turn back your piece so it's ready to be worked on, you're going to do it on the 2 raised knitted sections here. All right, so let's begin by knitting 4. Be sure to put your yarn to the front, purl 6, put your yarn to the back, bring in your cable knit stitch holder, put the first 2 stitches onto your cable knit stitch holder, put it to the back of the work, knit the next 2, be sure to pull it tight, come back to your cable knit stitch holder, slide those stitches around to the long side and knit them 1, and 2, Bring your yarn to the front, purl 6. Bring your yarn to the back of the work, bring in your cable stitch holder, load the first 2 stitches onto the short end, take it to the back of your work, knit 1 and 2, being sure to pull each stitch tight. Knit the last 2 stitches off of your cable stitch holder. Bring your yarn forward, purl 6. Bring your yarn to the back and knit the last 4 stitches. Now when you look at your piece, you should have 2 sets of cables here and here. Go ahead and continue in the pattern for 5 more stitches, and then we'll be ready to change off colors one more time. You're doing a wonderful job. If you look at your piece now, you'll see that you have cabling on one side and cabling on the other side. So now it's no longer a one-sided piece of art, it's a two-sided piece of art. So let's change over color one more time. Remember to hold it tight on the side. We're starting with purls this time. Go ahead and purl 4. Knit 6. You'll continue this way as far as you need to go to make this scarf as long as you'd like it to be. An average length of a scarf is between 4 and 6 feet. A 4-foot scarf works great for a child or a small adult, and a 6-foot scarf works great for a man or a taller woman. You want to keep them kind of proportionate to the person that you're making the scarf for, and that's a good rule of thumb, 4 to 6 feet, depending on the person the scarf is for. So what you'll do is you'll continue the pattern the way we've started it. We're only going to repeat the 2 sections that have the cabling in them. So repeat the cabled sections. If you count the number of stitches in each cabled section, there are a total of 11 rows. You'll have 5 rows, then your cabling row, 5 more rows, change colors, 5 rows, a cabling row, and 5 more rows. That pattern, that part of the pattern will repeat until you reach your desired length. Once you get to your desired length, you're going to finish with 2 more small sections color blocked at the end to create even balance at the other end of your scarf. So go ahead and work with your pattern until it reaches the desired length. Then we'll go ahead and cast off, and we'll add fringe, we'll sew up the edges, get rid of all of our spare threads, and we'll be finished. Once you've reached your desired length, we'll be ready to do the color block sections at the end. If you remember, the first 2 color block sections didn't have any cabling, and that's how we're going to end as well. I've worked with a smaller piece just so it will be easier and more manageable for the program. So let's change colors one more time. Remember, these last 2 sections of color block don't have any cabling, so it'll be easy to go across on these last 2 sections. You can leave your cable knit stitch holder on the table, and this part will go very fast. Remember, there are just 6 rows of color in the last 2 color block sections. Your scarf looks absolutely beautiful. Let's go ahead and finish it off now. Remember, when you cast off at the end, we're going to be doing it in garter stitch, so you'll cast off the knit stitches knitwise and the purl stitches purlwise. Let's go ahead and do that together. So we'll knit 4, knit the first 2, cast off, knit again, cast off, knit one more time, cast off. Remember to bring your yarn to the front as you change to the purls, purl, and cast off. Continue this way all the way across, and then your scarf will be ready to finish. At this point, your scarf is almost finished. We have some loose ends we need to work in, and we need to attach our fringe. So let's start by working in the loose ends. I've worked most of mine in already. We're going to use a yarn needle to work these ends into the finished project. So thread your yarn needle. You can see that there is a line of V's that goes straight up and down. That's one row of knit stitches. We're going to weave the yarn in and out of each knit stitch. So go over the first one, under the second one, over the third one, etc. As you can see, when you pull it tight, the yarn virtually disappears into the center of those V knit stitches. So go ahead and work it up all the way to the top of the white section, or whatever color you're working with. Make sure you don't pull your yarn through. When you get to the top, you can cut it off here, or you can come along and work down the following section. I'm going to work mine down one more time just to give it a little bit of extra security. I'm going to turn my piece and work it in and out of each V-shaped stitch in the very next row of knits. When you get to the end, bring it through to the back, and simply cut it off close. You're going to do that with each thread that is hanging on the edges. You'll have a new thread every time you changed off colors. Make sure that you work each color into its coordinating section. That way you won't have loose ends showing up throughout your piece of work. I have one more end to work through. You can work them in a little bit differently on the ends if you'd like to, or you can work them in the same way that I showed you previously. I'll show you an alternate way to do them on the ends. Thread your yarn needle. And then, as you can see, right along the top edge here, you can weave in and out of each stitch. You'll want to do it one yarn at a time rather than one stitch at a time. So as you can see, I've gone through and taken one side of each knit stitch and pulled it across. You can see this also will disappear into your finished project. This is the alternate way to work it in. Once you get to the purl section, you'll want to turn it over and continue the process on the second side. I find that it's much easier to work on the knit side when you're working across this way. Make sure that you pull them tight like this. That way it won't bunch up at the end. Make sure you go through at least 2 sections, but you can go through more if you'd like. The further you go with the thread, the more security you'll have. It's not going to come untied, but you do always run the risk that it could come unraveled. I'm going to work mine through 4 sections. I've done 2 purl sections and 2 knit sections, and now I'm going to go ahead and cut it close. Just like this. The other thing that you can do with your finished scarf at this point is to stretch out the sections like this. If you take a piece that has been completed and you block it, it'll hold the shape that it dries in. In order to block a piece, what you do is you dip it into water, you stretch it out the way you want it, you'll lay it flat to dry, and then after it dries, it'll maintain that shape. Even if you take it through the washing machine again, it'll hold that shape. So it's a great idea. That'll make it so that your cables will be straight this way. You'll be able to see some definition. It'll keep the width in your scarf as well. You'll be able to see definition on both sides with both sets of cables, so be sure that you block your scarf when it's finished. Now we're ready to do our fringe. What you need to do is measure a single piece of yarn, fold it in half to determine the length of your fringe. I've chosen to make my fringe rather long, but it's up to you. My fringe is about 17 or 18 inches long. I've decided to put fringe tufts at each section. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I will have 7 tufts of fringe at each end of the scarf. I've chosen to put 5 strings together for my fringe. You can do as few as 3, or you can do significantly more strings if you'd like a fluffier, fringier look. Cut your pieces all the same length, fold them in half. I use a yarn needle for this portion. You can also use a knitting needle or a crochet hook. Find the center of the section. This one has 6 stitches, so I'll count over 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to put it right between this section right here. You want to use your needle to kind of find where your hole is going to be. You can do it with a needle again, a knitting needle or a regular needle. Bring your folded fringe through. Like this. Don't pull it all the way through. You want to put something through the loop like this, pull the ends through, and pull it tight. That makes a single fringe tuft. We're going to do this 7 times all the way across the bottom. Let's go ahead and finish up our trim together. Remember, when you're sticking your needle in, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to work with. You can use a crochet hook for this or your regular needle. Bring your loop up, pull the ends through and tight. And our last bit of fringe. Okay, you pull them through on the loop, pull the ends through and tight. Then you'll want to make sure that all of your fringe ends are even. So put them out on a relatively flat surface. Use a nice pair of sharp scissors and trim off any stray ends. You've now finished your project. It's a beautiful scarf. You've learned how to do color blocking as well as cables. You've done cabling on both sides, so it's a reversible project. You've also learned how to do fringing and working in your ends. Thank you so much for letting me come to your home today and teach you how to do another project. You're becoming a wonderful knitter. Our next project will be on video number 4, and we will be doing a beautiful children's sweater and matching cap. We're going to travel the yarn across and learn how to do multicolored patterns. This is a Scandinavian style sweater. It's absolutely beautiful, so be sure to join us on video number 4. Thank you again for knitting with me today, and I hope we see you again soon.